Hi guys, Nathan Rader, Deutsche Telekom, leading some of the work we do around APIs, but also part of the Kamara. So I'm going to tell you a little story here, kind of on the journey of what Deutsche Telekom has done on network APIs, and I'm not going to kid myself. This isn't something new and innovative, right? I mean, this is probably the fourth or fifth try to do network APIs. So this is just the next iteration. We're going to hope it's successful. Maybe it will be, maybe it won't be, but at least we've got to give it a go. Halfway through my story, I'm going to stop and I'm going to talk about Kamara, and then I'll go back to finishing up my story. Put these slides together when I was sick the last couple of weeks, so I don't remember what I put in here, so forgive me when I kind of go off track. So how did we get here? How did this all start, at least from Deutsche Telekom? We were looking at Edge Cloud a few years back because that was the cool buzzword of the day, and we looked at our network, we did a lot of testing in our network, and ultimately we came to the conclusion that Germany's not very big, and Edge Cloud didn't really provide a huge benefit for us in Germany, but we also concluded that when we were looking at latency on our network, 65% of it came from the radio itself. And we said, well, maybe we should work on that first before we work on actually, shortening the speed of light. And that's where we started on, as I said, the fourth or fifth iteration of network APIs for the time. We spent a lot of time internally at DT convincing our, management that, hey, we can, have a little control of the network. That was, of course, a tough ask because nobody wants to give up control and say, oh, well, users can't, program it. That's bad. But we did it. We've convinced, and we started making APIs available. And it was great. And we could meet some customer needs. We, could hit national players in Germany that had telecom SIM cards, and that was about it. And so we ran into some learnings at that point in time. And our learnings were that very few customers actually fall into that unicorn category of wanting network APIs, only wanting them in Germany, and only wanting them on the telecom network. It didn't really work out for us. What they wanted was at least minimum market coverage. And the other thing that we heard from them is, yeah, those APIs too difficult to use. We don't have all of the information. So that brought us to the next step. How do we solve some of those problems? And that brought us into looking and saying, okay, well, the customer's telling us that they want these APIs everywhere. The customer is telling us that these APIs are too complex and we need to simplify them. And so we looked around and we said, okay, great, we can do this, but we need to have some sort of standard if we're going to have these APIs available in other places. But we didn't want to follow the standards path necessarily when we were looking at this because we wanted to have the customers actually contribute to things, because let's be honest, most customers aren't invited to, venues like this to come in and contribute. Some of them are, some of them aren't, but, not in the hundreds of millions that we were hoping for having. So we said, okay, let's go and build an open source initiative, and we talked to a lot of operators to do that. And so when we started building out and started looking at Kamara, we said, okay, what are we trying to solve with Kamara? So first, we've got to get that scale. We've got to get this in as many countries as possible because there's only a few of these unicorn customers out there that are looking to buy the APIs. Next, we wanted consistency. If you look at the major hyperscalers, what they're doing, you go in and use the APIs from them. They're all very set of consistent APIs. They're used in the same way, have the same authentication mechanisms. But then we also needed to make them simple. If we look at some of the APIs that we were using at the beginning, things like quality on demand, it required having information about what is your IMSI, what is your cell ID, some of those things that most developers will never have access to, or if they have access to, it's on some random third-party website that it really isn't supported. So we said, let's make this consistent. Let's look at this and make this more of an intent-based set of APIs where the developer just can give the intent of what they want to do and get the results that they were looking at. We needed to make them accessible. So We needed to make these APIs available where the developers are, allowing the developers to come and use it. And ultimately that led us to working with an open source project in the Linux Foundation, because developers are used to working in Linux Foundation open source projects, and we said, hey, let's go to where the developers are so they can do it. And the last thing we were really looking for with Kamara is we needed to ensure that we were actually building the APIs that were demanded by the customers. It's great as we as telcos can sit around and go, I got a great idea, I'm going to build this. But as we looked back at previous API initiative failures, that was one of the things we quickly learned, is that telcos built something that they thought the developers needed, not actually what the developers wanted. So then, how does the Kamara scope fit in? I think we've already seen the slides, where it fits in before. But if we just repeat it a little bit here, Kamara is really trying to sit in one very small, very tiny space, and that is the interface between the exposure gateway and the developer. So a developer-facing API. It's not trying to solve anything down in the bottom half of the network. It's not trying to solve anything within the network. It's really just looking to solve that interface scope between the developer and the network itself. Now, there are several other types of APIs besides the Kamara APIs that make this ecosystem successful. We've talked about them before. We have the Operate APIs from the TM Forum. We need those. Those were intentionally set up in a separate organization outside of Kamara, because if you look at what these Operate APIs are intended to do, they're intended to share information between platform to platform, and things like maybe exchanging pricing details. And let's be fair, we don't really want to have in our open source community an API that the developers can poke around in and go, oh, how do I mess around with pricing details? That's usually something we felt wasn't good. We put those into another location, and we reserve in Kamara, again, APIs that are specifically designed to be developer facing. So looking at it as sort of two types. One is the service API itself, so the API the developer is actually calling to enact the service, but then also some service management APIs, so things like, is a service available? What is the current quality of that service? If you're looking for, say, quality on demand, maybe it's good to know, is the network even congested before you enact quality on demand? So those are the types of APIs that we're looking to define within the Kamara project. There is, shameless plug, lots of participants in Kamara currently. There is a smaller group of folks that are sponsoring Kamara and donating to Kamara. And then there's a lot of just participating organizations that are there, providing input, feedback, development, and other things. So, we've got Kamara. It's working. We've got a common set of APIs available between several networks. Now, the next challenge comes along here is, how do we make others actually use these Kamara APIs that they're available? And therein starts to form the idea of the GSMA Open Gateway. So getting operators around the globe to sign up and commit to a memorandum of understanding where they will then take and make these Kamara APIs available in their network. That's been rolling out, lots of signatories there, lots of noise that's happened at Mobile World Congress in the past, and I'm sure will continue to happen. And we've now got multiple APIs in multiple networks around the globe, which is, again, good, because now we're starting to able to serve another set of customers. Now, this set of customers is the ones that are looking at things in a multiple network, but still on a single operator. So we can have in different countries, different markets, different operators, they're all using the same set of APIs, but as we move forward with that, we gain some more learnings. In that case, we learned that it's great that we have these APIs that are available in all the networks, but we really need to aggregate these together. We need to get a single API endpoint. We need to make it easy for the customer so that they don't have to go out and say, oh, I've got a common API and 20 networks, but now I have to get 20 contracts and sign those up. I have to get 20 operator tokens, and then I have to make that all work. We really need to make it simple, give them a single endpoint, provide some form of aggregation, and get these, unaligned deployments solved. So then, at Deutsche Telekom, we started working on the next project. That project was launched about a month and a half ago, maybe 2 months ago now, as an API venture, where we worked with a small group of telco operators and said, what if we were to actually build our own aggregation platform and make it available, sort of by telcos, for telcos, to aggregate these APIs so that developers could have a simple system. We started working on that, but then we realized telcos working together sometimes is difficult. We get into a very consensus-driven mode. Maybe we need to find a technical partner to help. We did a little bit of looking, roped in Ericsson, and ultimately came to the conclusion that we were going to launch a commercial network API venture for aggregating APIs. It doesn't have a name yet. We'll have some sort of cool name and logo soon, hopefully. But of course, this is still an activity that's in some regulatory approval, which we hope will be done end of the year. And then we'll have a cool logo, a cool name, and being able to offer that. Now, once we have that, we actually feel that we can get to that third customer type that we're going to have. That one that's looking at multiple markets, multiple operators, needs aggregation across the board, wants that single endpoint, wants one contract to sign, and so we really are hoping that that's where we're going to be able to deliver that scope.